So after the LibreOffice video went up, the comments started rolling in and they kept coming. And I get it, because when you cover a story about forking only Office, the obvious question is, what about the other option? What about Collabora and LibreOffice? As it turns out, while I was making that video, something pretty big was happening inside the LibreOffice project itself. Something that directly answers why Collabora got passed over, and that could change the landscape for anyone running a self-hosted Office suite right now. This is a story about a community that built something great, the company that kept it alive, and what actually happens when those two things stop being compatible. Also, just as a quick heads up, Ethan Shawley did a write-up in the Self-Host newsletter last week that explores today's video topic as well. So if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, you should be. So I will be sure to have that link in the video description so that you can check it out at your leisure. So to understand what just happened, we need to go back to 2009. At the time, OpenOffice.org was the dominant open source Office suite. Millions of people used it, and it had a huge contributor community, and it was owned by Sun Microsystems. Then Oracle bought Sun, and if you know anything about Oracle's track record with open source projects, you already know where this is going. The developer community looked at what Oracle was doing with OpenOffice, looked at each other, and then decided they weren't going to wait to find out. In September of 2010, a group of contributors announced a fork. They called it LibreOffice, and they set up a non-profit to steward it called the Document Foundation, or TDF for short. LibreOffice launched its first stable release in January of 2011, and within a year, it recorded over 7.5 million downloads, and within 4 years, over 120 million. The fork worked, and the community won. And one of the key figures in making that happen was a developer named Michael Meeks, who had been working on the OpenOffice codebase since the early 2000s. He would go on to become the general manager of a company called Collabora Productivity, the company at the center of everything that just happened. Fast forward to 2011, and LibreOffice is off to a strong start as a desktop application. But the world is moving towards cloud-based, browser-accessible software. Google Docs is gaining traction, Microsoft is building what would become Microsoft 365, and people start asking, can you use LibreOffice in a browser? Development of what would become LibreOffice Online started that same year, and from the beginning, Collabora was doing the heavy lifting. In 2015, they released the first technical preview, and by February of 2017, the first full source code release shipped alongside LibreOffice 5.3. For the next several years, LibreOffice Online kept developing, and it became the backend that powered document editing inside Nextcloud. If you've ever opened a document in your Nextcloud instance and edited it inside the browser, there's a very good chance that Collabora's work is what made that possible. By 2020, though, something had shifted inside TDF. The board voted to freeze development of LibreOffice Online and put it in what they called the attic. The stated reason at the time was the conflict with Collabora, who was now building a commercial product around the same codebase. So here's the situation that created. TDF froze the community version, Collabora kept building the commercial version, and for the next 6 years, LibreOffice Online sat dormant. An open letter in 2022 asked TDF to revive it, and nothing happened. So from a practical standpoint, if you wanted browser-based LibreOffice, Collabora Online was the only real option. And Collabora had invested, by their own account, multiple millions of euros to make that happen. In November of 2025, Collabora made a move that changed the dynamic significantly. They released Collabora Office Desktop, a standalone desktop app built on the same codebase as Collabora Online, and this wasn't just a cloud product anymore. This was a product that competed directly with LibreOffice on the desktop. Then, in February of 2026, TDF's new board voted to revive LibreOffice Online. After 6 years in the attic, they were restarting development. From TDF's perspective, this was just correcting a past mistake. From Collabora's perspective, this was TDF deciding to compete with the product Collabora had spent years and millions of euros building, right after Collabora had also moved onto TDF's turf with a desktop app. Michael Meeks called it an extraordinary decision. He said it was unclear what more Collabora could have done to make TDF recognize their value, noting that Collabora had contributed around half the highlighted features in the most recent LibreOffice release. TDF's board responded that the decision to archive LibreOffice Online in the first place had been a mistake, and that they were just leveling the playing field for the community. They didn't see it as competing with Collabora. But both things can be technically true and still produce a collision. On April 1st, 2026, Collabora published a blog post. And before you check the date and assume this was some kind of April Fool's thing, it wasn't. Michael Meeks even addressed that directly in the post. He wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here, "If you got here and thought this is the most outrageously implausible set of circumstances, it can't be true. Well done. This is indeed April 1st, but sadly, this really is a summary of where we are now." What happened was this. TDF's membership committee voted to remove all Collabora staff and partners from TDF membership. Over 30 people gone in one move. And that included 7 of LibreOffice's top 10 core committers of all time, people who had been building the software for over a decade. And some of them had been involved since the original OpenOffice fork back in 2010. TDF's official justification was their community bylaws, which required that employees of companies involved in active legal disputes with TDF step down from membership. The reasoning is that in the past, some people had put their employers' interests ahead of the foundation's. So what was the legal dispute? Neither side had said publicly. That detail is just missing from both statements. And here's the part that really got community reaction. TDF's response also made clear that while Collabora staff were being removed from membership, they were not being banned from contributing code. TDF said they expected Collabora to keep contributing when the time comes. So the message was essentially, you're out of governance, you have no vote, and you have no say. But please keep submitting patches. Now, Collabora isn't sitting still. Meeks laid out plans for a new product, a lighter, cleaner Collabora Office built from a smaller code base. No Java, no legacy database dependencies, web-based toolkit. They're also moving their entire development infrastructure off of TDF's tools and onto self-hosted open source tooling, which, if you watch this channel, you'll appreciate the irony of. A dispute inside the open source world being resolved partly by one side going more self-hosted. On whether they'll keep contributing to LibreOffice at all, Meeks wrote, "We will continue to make contributions to LibreOffice where it makes sense, if we're welcome to, but it clearly no longer makes much sense to continue investing heavily in building what remains of TDF's community and product for them while being excluded from its governance. In this regard, we seem to be back where we were 15 years ago." That last line is the one that sticks. 15 years ago, the community walked away from Oracle and built LibreOffice. Now, in 2026, the company that did more than anyone to keep LibreOffice Online alive is walking away from the foundation that governs it. Now, this is where this loops back to the questions that your comments were asking. When Nextcloud and Ionos launched EuroOffice as the fork of OnlyOffice, they chose OnlyOffice's codebase over Collabora's, and Collabora noticed. They published an analysis questioning whether EuroOffice was truly European at all, pointing to extensive Russian language code comments throughout the OnlyOffice codebase that EuroOffice inherited. Meanwhile, Nextcloud's VP of Communications was pretty direct about why they went with OnlyOffice over Collabora. The short version? They wanted a full web app, not something that runs mostly on the server. And they wanted something under an open, transparent governance model that was welcoming to contributors. That last part lands differently now. Open, transparent governance model welcoming to contributors, set at the exact moment TDF is ejecting 30 of its top contributors. So to answer the comment directly, why OnlyOffice and not Collabora? Partly technical, partly political, and the timing made the political part a lot louder. So what does this mean for you or whoever happens to be using this? If you're running Collabora Online right now inside Nextcloud or Cfile or any other self-hosted platform, nothing changes immediately. Collabora Online is still being actively developed, and the product isn't going anywhere. Their classic version has committed to long-term support. But the landscape is less settled than it was a month ago, and here's what's actually in play right now. LibreOffice on the desktop lost most of its senior active developers from the foundation's governance overnight. TDF says that they're hiring replacements and that donations are growing. Whether that's enough to fill the gap left by 7 of the top 10 core committers is a real question, though, not a rhetorical one. Collabora is building something new with a cleaner code base. That could be genuinely exciting, or it could pull resources away from the products people are depending on today, and we just don't know yet. And LibreOffice Online is back from the dead, but still not a downloadable product. TDF's board member said it could be months or even years before it's ready for real deployment. So the honest answer to which one should I use is, if you need a self-hosted browser-based Office suite today, Collabora Online is still your most mature option. LibreOffice for desktop is still solid and still being developed, and EuroOffice is early and worth watching, and this whole situation is still moving. What I find fascinating about all of this, and maybe a little unsettling, is how familiar the story is. In 2010, a community built LibreOffice because a corporate owner stopped serving their interests. Now, in 2026, a company is effectively leaving LibreOffice because a foundation stopped serving theirs. The roles reversed completely. Open source governance is hard. Keeping a foundation and its commercial partners aligned long-term might actually be the hardest part. And when it breaks down, it's the users and the community contributors caught in the middle. If you want to dig into the primary sources on this, I've linked everything in the video description. Collabora's statement, TDF's official responses, and independent coverage. It's worth reading both sides directly. And definitely drop your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are you running Collabora Online, LibreOffice? Are you watching EuroOffice? I'm curious about what's going on in the community and where the community lands on this whole scenario. But I think with all of that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me here today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.